for another Explain to Me Like I'm Five. Here was Connor. Connor, how you doing?
I am fantastic. Thank you very much. How about you, Caleb?
I'm doing good. Back in podcasting. Took probably, a month or two off, but I'm back. I'm ready to get back into it. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast. I'm looking forward to it. Glad to have you back in podcasting.
I'm glad to be back because those 2 months were very boring. It was very boring. I'm taking a break from podcasting and figure out my life. And I'm like, my life is boring. I got to go back to podcasting. So here we are. So we're doing Explain to Me Like I'm Five on fossil fuels. Now, I know nothing about this topic. I take the pro-fossil fuel stance just to piss off my liberal friends, but I actually don't know anything about the topic besides like a few videos of Tom Woods I watched with Alex Epstein, who he sounds way smarter than he looks, and that's not. I expected him to look older, honestly. Then I saw what it looks like. I'm like, he looks young. He looks way too young to be sounding like that, But he's definitely an intelligent guy because his videos are. I watched him do a debate, and it was incredible.
Yeah, he's brilliant. He's a huge inspiration for me. So a year ago, like last week, was buying solar panels for I live in a tiny house, like in a trailer, and I was actively pursuing changing it to solar energy. And he came on the Human Action podcast back when I was interning for Jeff Deist at the Mises Institute, and it was literally when he did that Human Action podcast episode that I picked up his book, and as soon as I read his book, I was flipped on the issue. It's game-changing. He's really brilliant. I think he's the best there is on this particular topic.
I would have to agree because I watched a few like Ben Shapiro videos on climate science, and his arguments are not as like. It seems like to me most people who how to put this. This is the nice thing about libertarians is they kind of have that like Ayn Rand energy where they take something that everyone is demonized and say, no, that's a good thing actually, and that energy is I like that energy, so fossil fuels are better than climate than the green energy. It's like no. Like the modern conservative arguments like, well, clean energy is nice, but it's not reliable, so we have to go with fossil fuels. Right? Like fossil fuels are the future. Here's why they're good, and here's why clean energy doesn't work. Like it's much more an assertive position.
Yeah, Epstein nails that. Jeff even brought it up in his Human Action podcast. He said if anyone has an opinion on anything, even if it's not fossil fuels, they should read his chapter 4 of Fossil Future, which is arguing to 100, and it's all about cutting well, that's nice, but it doesn't work, so we'll settle for this at the door. Like, leave that behind. That's garbage. You show up and you say, this is the best thing that's ever happened to civilization, and that's why we need more of it. Because even if green energy were nice, which as we get into this episode, I'll say it's not. But even if that were true, that's nice, but it doesn't quite work, so this is the best we've got. Even if that were the reality, when that's your starting point, then you're going to end up compromising in the middle. Epstein is so good on saying, F all that, argue to 100, and if you have to compromise at 50, not at 50 their way.
That definitely seems to be a major problem with like mainstream conservative thought, is they always want to meet them halfway, so their starting point is already conceding half the battle.
Be prepared to compromise if you have to. I mean, politics is part of life, but start at 100 and concede to 50. Don't start at 0 and compromise at negative 50.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into this. I have a list of questions here and a list of objections that the average person might ask or the typical liberal might object to, and we're going to go through them.
Absolutely.
So let's start with the first one. What are fossil fuels?
So fossil fuels, I'm going to use a word that's not explaining like I'm 5. What the real word for fossil fuels is hydrocarbons. But the reason they have this fancy science word is just really what it sounds like. It's a combination of hydrogen and carbon. And all that is where the name fossil fuels comes from. It's typically stored from past living life. And it's the energy that was within them, built up over thousands, millions, however many years, built up, pressurized, and put into what we know today as fossil fuels. We now can access it as coal or natural gas or oil, but it's really the result of that energy stored in the body of former biological life now in those forms. And what's so great about it in those forms is that by being a rock of coal pressurized so deeply, it is concentrated in such a way that the amount of energy you get per amount of rock of coal you have is much more than you'll get in other sources of energy, which, as I'm sure we'll get into, makes it a uniquely cost-effective source of energy.
What is clean energy? Like you explained the first part, what is the counterpart? Like what is the clean energy compared to, is it really clean energy? Like what is exactly, when no one says clean energy, what do they mean by that?
So clean energy, and I think we'll get into this a little more with the next question as well. Clean energy is one, I like your air quotes, it's not necessarily clean, but what they mean by that is it's energy that doesn't impact, or that doesn't leave an impact. Because most of our systems use the world through an anti-impact lens, and that's why they dislike fossil fuel so much, because it leaves an impact. Clean energy would be that doesn't leave an impact. There are flaws with that because, one, most of the energies they suggest leave plenty of an impact. If you were to give the old conservative arguing to zero, you might be able to claim they don't leave as much of an impact as fossil fuels. However, they don't have nearly the benefit of fossil fuels. Not they don't work like fossil fuels. Fossil fuels build civilizations, and wind energy or solar energy powers my dock-light. So it's not the difference of, well, this kind of works and this really, I mean, it's enormously different. So that being said, the steel man of the argument would be to say that clean energy is energy that doesn't impact the environment. The straw man, which is probably closer to accurate than the steel man, is that clean energy is anything that's not fossil fuels, because people want to make clean energy is the phrase that makes fossil fuels sound like dirty energy.
This isn't a question that's listed, but what do you think is like the main reason why so many people hate fossil fuels? Like, is this pure like what's the motivation for the anti-fossil fuel propaganda?
Well, again, that comes a lot from Epstein talks about this a lot, where it's the anti-impact framework. Whenever we evaluate fossil fuels or energy of any kind, we evaluate it based on how much it changes the earth, how much it changes our environment, and we come at it with this, Epstein calls it the delicate nurture perspective. We act as though the earth is stable, efficient, and safe, and that if we just were plopped on Earth without the use of certain technologies, we'd be completely fine. The reality of the world, however, is, again, as Epstein explains, is that it is dynamic, deficient, and dangerous. Human beings very much struggle to live on Earth. I'm in Auburn, Alabama in the summertime. You're in, I believe, Florida.
Florida, yeah.
Neither of us are in places that human beings would naturally be able to survive. And we act as fossil fuel adversaries say impacts are inherently negative, except fossil fuels impacts include the fact that they've made both of us able to live places that certainly in the summer a human being should not be able to survive. Dude, Florida, I mean, like, you should be underwater by many mechanisms, or in a swamp that'd be completely unbuildable. So many of the impacts of fossil fuels are inherently positive, but most of our framework judges energy sources with the initial assumption that impact is bad. Therefore, even in positive impacts, they say are impacts. And when you acknowledge that impact, suddenly they say, well, then it must be bad. We must look for other options that don't leave an impact.
No, this makes me wonder, like, what is the motivation for the idea that zero impact is the goal? I mean, human beings make impact everywhere they go. I mean, just walking outside, you made an impact on like your surroundings. You know, human beings just unnaturally cause impact by existing in different areas. So I wonder what, like, it sounds like an anti-human, like an anti-humanism.
It's absolutely anti-human. It's anyone with an anti-impact framework is anti-human. You're either someone who's been propagandized and you fall for the propaganda, or if you're pushing the propaganda, then you are anti-human. I mean, to say anti-impact is either to blatantly ignore the fact that we as humans need impact to survive, or it is to not understand the fact that we as humans need impact to survive. It can't. There's no other option. So you're either acting in an anti-human manner on purpose, or you've fallen into propaganda that's told you to.
We got a audience question real quick. Would a cat strapped to a slice of toast and dropped in a vacuum be considered clean energy?
That is my boy. I love you. I can't believe you're actually watching. I actually am going to say no, because I would say earlier I said green energy is bad, and that's clearly a good source of energy that we need more of. So I'm going to proliferate that. In fact, if anything, I think that's a biofuel, which I suppose is technically an alternative to energy, but they definitely don't consider that clean energy.
Next question. We already kind of answered that one. But anyway, what are the reason all my liberal friends claim fossil fuels are evil? Like, I have a friend who is former friend, who's very, very liberal, and he is constantly going on about how electric cars are the future, solar energy, wind energy, all these things are better than fossil fuels and better than he even claims solar fields are better than nuclear energy. Was right then when he said that, I was like, I don't know enough about this topic, but I know enough to know that's wrong.
Nuclear energy is a phenomenal litmus test for how serious a person is. I'm going to hold off on commenting on it because I know that's one of our later questions.
Yeah.
But yes, we did kind of already answer why people are what was the question? Why all my liberal friends claim fossil fuels are evil? It is it's a matter of the anti-impact framework. It's exactly what we said. It's that they're ignoring the benefits and they're catastrophizing the detriments. But the other reality of it is it's largely, and again, most of what I'm saying comes straight out of Epstein's book. I'll say that again because I know you're going to ask me what I can recommend, but if there's one thing you should walk away and read, it's Fossil Future. But he refers to it as our knowledge system is very corrupt. It's very quick where you have a diversity of opinions and someone has to summarize these opinions. So thus they summarize it leaning towards what they want to be true, which is some green energy BS. And then the summarization is read and given to us by our media, which gets skewed again. And by the time it actually gets in human hands, not human hands, but like in average people's hands, it sounds like 97% of people say fossil fuels are bad. It's well, no, 97% of the people within this summary of this summary say that it's bad. In reality, it leaves many vital people like Alex Epstein who are arguing very impressively on behalf, showing that it's not bad. And the other reason, and this is probably something, especially since this is a Catholic show, so many Catholic viewers can understand in things like the pro-life debate. Another reason it gets treated as bad is that we accept science alone as an argument, and we ignore ethics, we ignore economics, we ignore so many other vital fields of study that are so important to what we do. Like Alex Epstein himself is a self-described philosopher, and that's because the question of human flourishing is an ethics question. The science is a matter of what can, but what should is a matter of ethics. And another one of the major reasons we see so many liberals advocating against fossil fuels is that they're getting their ethics from scientists when they need to be getting an ethical framework and understanding science after that.
It's very similar. The way I see it is like the same way Catholics, we build up our ethics and our philosophy from our theology. It seems like the modern liberal theology is just scientism. It's just science. Yeah. Like they just use that science as theology.
And they hear these scientists, and a scientist can quite easily say fossil fuels are bad. They demonstrably have more impact than solar energy. They demonstrably have more impact than, well, not than wind energy. There's a whole argument to be made there. But they demonstrably have more impact than insert alternative energy here. No other factors matter because I'm just here studying the science of the matter. I'm not studying the ethics of what is actually good for humanity. I'm not studying the economics of what we can actually afford and what we can actually make happen and what is feasible and what people want. And when I don't study this, I look at science and I say it's objectively true, according to the science, that fossil fuels are worse than green energy because they leave more of an impact. But there are so many factors beyond science of ethics and economics that matter significantly more than the amount of, because it's an ethical claim to say that impact is bad. It's a scientific claim to say that there is more or less impact. But the question of more or less impact only matters if we know the ethical claim beneath that of what we are actually striving.
I agree. It seems like it's like this topic and like the overpopulation topic are good lenses to kind of understand the issue with modern liberalism and modern like the theology of science.
Yeah,
like this topic of overpopulation are very good lenses for that. Speaking of overpopulation, if anyone listening wants to go and check out, I had Ryan Turnipseed on a few months back for Explaining Like I'm 5, the overpopulation mess, which was a fantastic episode. Ryan Turnipseed talked for most of it, so you're lucky. So definitely, if you're listening and want to check it out, please go check it out. It's a phenomenal episode.
Such a great guy,
dude. I love that guy. The more every time I talk to him, and I'm just like, this is a great dude. And we have also his loose wood. We have our disagreements there, obviously, but he is such a solid and great guy. It seems like,
Yeah, absolutely.
So, big fan of him.
I met him last year at Mises U, and then I saw him again this year at AERT. Such a great dude.
Yeah, he seemed like he'd be a very fun guy to hang out with.
Absolutely.
So next question. What is wrong with clean energy? It's clean. So why is it bad? Clean sounds good, Ryan. I mean, Connor. Clean sounds good. So why is clean bad?
All right, we there are a couple things wrong with it. The first is that it's, in fact, actually, for what it's shameless plug here, everybody keep an eye out. You can follow me on Twitter, or you can just keep an eye out on Mises.org. Not this coming week, but the week after that, I'm going to have an Mises Wire article answering very much this question. And in a recent talk, Joe Biden said solar and wind energy are less expensive than oil. And as such, let's throw in the towel. I mean, like you said, clean is good. And if it's also less expensive, why are we even arguing over that? And the answer is that even if that were true, even if it were clean, which I, for the sake of argument, will concede, but no. And even if it were less costly just on unit of energy to unit of energy, it's still not an ideal answer, because even conceding that, we have two major factors. Actually, more than two. The first is that the only reason we're able to get it to be clean and the only reason we're able to get it to be less costly is because it is an enormously regulated field. They have so many laws on the books to force green energy to look cleaner and less expensive than fossil fuels. And to put that in perspective, so my summer research at the Mises Institute this year is on fossil fuels, and it's on this human flourishing framework that Epstein talks about. In my research, I went to the Department of Energy's page to pull up their laws and incentives to push people to use green energy. And when I downloaded the laws and or regulations and incentives, just on regulations and incentives, no other types of laws that they have on the books, just the incentive-based regulations, there were so many on the book, it crashed my computer trying to download them. There were 1,835 incentives currently on the book, according to the Department of Energy website. So to begin with, you're coming from such a skewed perspective where we pretend that they're clean and less expensive, when in reality, they have rigged the game to make them look cleaner and less expensive. Furthermore, in the places where they are cheaper or cleaner, however you want to phrase it, both options, the places where we find them to be better all around always have higher energy costs. We find them in places like California where the energy costs are through the roof. And the reason for this is that these green energies end up always relying on one of three things. They either have to rely on a controllable source of energy like fossil fuels because they're unreliable themselves. They need fossil fuels to back them up. So most green energies are effectively green energy when it's convenient, but when it starts getting cold out or hot out, all of a sudden the fossil fuels start kicking in to cover up what it can't handle. Or they're relying on a extremely diverse, distant, and enormous network of solar panels or wind turbines, and in which case that throws the anti-impact clean argument out the window. To have enough wind turbines or solar panels to be as reliable as fossil fuels, you'd have to be far more impactful than fossil fuels. Or lastly, they're relying on a man-made storage system to store enough energy to meet the demands at all times. And that has a couple problems. One, the storage of solar and wind energy is ridiculous in comparison to the storage of coal or oil, because, for example, sometimes it's not windy and sometimes it's night. So you can't rely on constantly feeding into this, where coal in its natural state is already stored, already ready to go. Wind and solar, naturally, it's just wind. I mean, you could use it in its natural state to push a sailboat, but if you're trying to generate electricity, you have to build a battery that is enormously expensive and makes it, again, not as clean and not as cheap as fossil fuels.
Mm.
I had one last point to make on that last one, but I'm blanking on what it was. But the reality of the matter is, it's a fun little myth we tell ourselves that, oh, they're clean, that way they must be better. But they're either so expensive that they prohibit any average person from actually using them, or they're more impactful than fossil fuels, and they simply can't be neither. And in fact, Epstein refers to it as the private jet problem, that every person I know wants a private jet. I've never met someone who didn't want a private jet, but it's so cost prohibitive to have a private jet. Fossil fuels have made things like private jets not the norm. If you were trying to live our civilization on green energy, most things would be entirely cost prohibitive from the average or per person being able to actually use most things.
Mm.
I may have ranted more than the question was.
No, it's good. It's good. You answered probably a lot of questions people are going to have listening to this. So that was good. Next question. Well, you got a bit to know what's wrong with clean energy. But if you want to kind of go into detail, like what's wrong with it, you kind of already answered it. But if you want to,
yeah, I mostly answered that in what I was saying, because it's not reliable energy. If it's reliable, it's not clean, and if it's clean, it's not reliable. And either way, it can't live up to fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are a uniquely cost-effective civilization-building source of energy, and we're starting to see things like nuclear be able to match it at its level. But any green energy we look at simply can't match. And as far as what's wrong with it, this I didn't answer. I mean, I started with the impoverished, but I didn't touch on this, so I'll touch on it for this question. What's wrong with clean energy is that it is unreliable to the point that people would die if we shifted back to clean energy. And Alex Epstein talks about this a lot. Literally, to start his book, he gives an anecdote of all the deaths that occur in the unempowered world. And the unempowered world is anywhere in the world that has less electricity than the average American's one third of the average American's energy. And there are huge parts of the world that are still relying on burning wood to provide for their village. I mean, obviously, most of the world has become modernized, but there are still very impoverished parts of the world. And when we make this green energy push, it's not reliable for us. And we see things like in Texas last year, we had the freeze, and everybody blamed Texas for having its own grid. But what happened was Texas had been making shifts to green energy, and it was unreliable. And when it came time to need a reliable source of energy, it screwed people here in an empowered part of the world. And if that's what it can do to the empowered world, you can only imagine if we were pushing unreliable energy on the already unempowered world, what that would do to such civilization. I mean, we get to stand on our laurels of 200 years of fossil fuels and capital accumulation, where we get to sit here and say, well, you should have green energy. The places that didn't have our 200 years of fossil fueled machine labor are in bad shape, and without proliferation of fossil fuels will get worse.
The switch to fossil fuels, like, how to put this? building a civilization off of fossil fuels to switch to green energy and then kind of what's the one I'm looking for here? Persist off of the reserves and system we've already built off of fossil fuels seems similar to how I think it was Sweden who built the country off of a good market system and switched to socialism and kind of just coasted from there.
Yes, exactly. So my office mate here at the Institute is doing his research on MMT, monetary theory, modern monetary theory, and what's wrong with it. And he and I have been using the term luxury beliefs back and forth. I think we found it in a Mises paper, but it's not a Mises original term. But it's referencing these things where someone has had the benefits of a massively wealthy society and thus looks down on the things that made their society wealthy and looks at these other civilizations and said, well, you shouldn't be doing that. And these people advocating for MMT and for green energy, which are the two things we're here fighting against in our office, are luxury beliefs at their finest. They're people who are standing on the backs of giants saying they can fly.
I like that term, luxury belief. That seems like a very fitting term for a lot of like modern liberal beliefs.
I was just saying, I think in our world today, ever since I've heard the term luxury beliefs, I can't look back because it feels like every other argument I'm having is with a luxury belief.
Yeah, that is a good term. I like that term. Yeah. I'm gonna have to use that. Okay, so now we're going to switch into the more of the objection side of things. So let me just make the switch. There we go. Like it over the top with Sylvester Stallone, I flipped the switch. I'm now in the objection phase. So I love that movie, and I had to find some way to fit it in. So from here going forward, these are not my own beliefs. These are just formulated objections that someone might pose to this. So if you're listening, you can kind of get a sense of the common objections someone might pose to you if you hold this position. So first one, I was told oil comes from dinosaurs, and eventually it's run out of oil. Is that not the case? Are we not going to just run out of oil? We need to switch to solar energy if we're going to just run out of dinosaurs.
So this is one of the reasons I'm trying to, for my research, give an economics backing to the philosophical argument, because this is one of the places where economics really answers it. And it's that the premise of economics is allocating scarce goods. And it is true that if we continued fossil fuel use increasing at the rate we're going and didn't increase our ability to use fossil fuels and didn't change the technology in the way in which we use fossil fuels, we probably would run out. But if you look at the projections for the past 100 years and you just go back and look at this is how much fossil fuels we're going to use and this is why we're going to run out, every single projection when pushed forward to 2023, with the exception of like 2022's, is wrong. And it's because people project our fossil fuel use assuming we live in a static economy and assuming our technology will not improve. The means by which we use fossil fuels are constantly improving. The way we access fossil fuels are constantly improving. Everything we're doing is technologically constantly improving. And as such, we get better at using fossil fuels and we can make more with less. And the great irony of it all is not just that is it dynamic markets that allow for us to do this. Nothing makes us better at using fossil fuels than fossil fuels. It is the fossil fueled machine labor that lets us use fossil fuels more efficiently and thus need less fossil fuels. So when they push for solar, it does two things. One, okay, we make the claim we're running out of fossil fuels. We get on solar and we're using less fossil fuels and it makes us less efficient generally. But it also makes our fossil fueled machine labor take a hit. And as such, it makes our ability to use the energy itself develop slower and become less efficient there as well.
On fossil fuels, the number one cause of climate change. And isn't climate change the reason we have more wildfires and hurricanes?
So this is probably the argument Alex Epstein makes that is most impressive. This is what won me over in his book. there are many arguments about this topic of discussion with climate change and whether or not fossil fuels are the number one cause. I tend to find myself comfortably siding with those quicker to deny climate change. However, Alex Epstein makes this point brilliantly, where he shows that it doesn't matter. Whether the answer is yes or no, it absolutely doesn't matter. Within the last 100 years, when carbon emissions have skyrocketed more than ever, conceding any negative weather effects are because of fossil fuels. Not just it's increased somewhat because of it. Alex Epstein says, okay, let's concede that 100% of increased negative weather effects are because of fossil fuels. Let's look at what bad has been done by that. And the question is, how much has climate-related deaths increased in the past 100 years? And the answer is that it has fallen by 98%. And that's because fossil-fueled machine labor allows us to build sturdier structures. Fossil fuels allow us to have things like air conditioning that help us fight against the climate. They help us have heat that help us fight against colder climates. Fossil fuels create byproducts like plastics that may have their own flaws. Plastics let us build in different ways and use different tools. And even if fossil fuels were 100% responsible for worsened weather, then if we want to play that game, we also have to accept that fossil fuels are also responsible for our increased ability to fight against the weather. We have far more mastery over our climate than we did prior to fossil fuels. So even if we were to concede that there are more tornadoes and more hurricanes because of this, well, then we have to ask, why are people dying of tornadoes and hurricanes less? These hurricanes, what is making it able to do that? And it is fossil fueled machine labor, fossil fuel byproducts, and fossil fuel energy. And then on top of it, I actually have a Mises Wire article entitled "Fossil Fuels Enable Us to Better Fight Fires and Other Environmental Disasters." And you mentioned in your questions that the climate change has led to more forest fires and whatnot. I brought up the recent Canadian forest fires, and everyone is so quick to blame them on climate change and fossil fuels, when in reality, the number one way to fight against these forest fires that are currently happening is to proliferate fossil fuels. Because you look at it, the leading ways to fight against wildfires are reducing the fuel load, building fire barriers, and intelligently fighting fires. Well, the fuel load reduction is done regularly through controlled burns and whatnot, generally using controlled burns. Well, controlled burns are targeted best with the technology that is brought about through fossil fuels. It is by creating fire breaks to prevent uncontrolled spread, I'm quoting Epstein here, planning the exact area to be burned, and assessing success with satellite imagery that we couldn't have without fossil fuels, via airplanes we couldn't have without fossil fuels. In addition to these controlled burns, we can use fossil-fueled machine labor to do more logging that removes significant portions of the fuel load and actually converts that wood into wildfire and that wood that was being converted into wildfire into wealth for the system rather than into wildfire. We can do mechanical brush clearing using tractors that need fossil fuels. So at the end of the day, even if we were to concede that fossil fuels are 100% responsible for climate change, all of the solutions to climate change rely heavily on fossil fuels, and we are better off dying less and safer because of fossil fueled machine labor.
It's just, I think this is a point Michael Knowles made recently that I think other people have made as well, but I heard it from him first. So I'm going to attribute it to him. Is that even if you kind of accepted all of the climate change arguments, we're already too far gone, they say. So there's no point even trying.
Yeah. Michael Knowles just said that. I was actually pissed at him because I was about to write a Mises Wire article on it, and then he said it, and then everybody and their dog had written that article somewhere, so I didn't do it. It was because Greta Thunberg's, we have 5 years to stop using fossil fuels, and if we don't by then, it's over. And that 5-year date has come and gone.
Yeah.
We're it's worth. If you look it up, that is one of many dates that's coming on.
What was Al Gore's date? Was like what 2005? He said once. It's like 07 maybe. It was just like, oh, the adventure of the internet, way off.
They say that we should listen to 96% of the science. If we were to look at 98% of the predictions that have been made, they all say we should continue using fossil fuels because it's too late anyway. The world's already over.
Yeah. It seems like to me a lot of the science around fossil fuels assumes, like I mentioned earlier, assumes like a static economy. It kind of assumes static.
Again,
Here's now we're never going to get better at
it comes back to what I was saying earlier, that that people are treating science as the only study in this field, when in reality there's science and there's ethics and there's economics. There's far more than just science. And if you were to, science can tell you that in a static economy, with this specific rate we're going, it could run out. The problem is that's not the world we live in, and science can't answer that because it's other fields of study that need to answer that question.
Question from the chat. What's Colin's opinion on peak oil versus potential peak oil investment release in the last couple of years?
Garrett's smarter than I am, so this is a problem for me. I can't answer that. Peak oil investment. Garrett, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by peak oil investment? I don't know that term. Comment again if you want to follow up.
Yeah, well, when he comments again, we'll answer the question then.
Yeah.
We got one here from Screwed Up Rebellion. I love Sevron and Connor Mortel.
I agree with you, Screwed Up Rebellion.
Okay, next question. What about nuclear energy? I mean, nuclear energy sounds nice, but then you have all these things like Chernobyl and that thing that happened in Japan a few years back. Like, it just seems like the downside of nuclear energy is way more dangerous than the potential upside.
So, nuclear energy is an interesting one. I like nuclear energy. I used to work for the Florida House of Representatives. I think I've mentioned that on this show before. And when I was working for the Florida House of Representatives, the Chernobyl miniseries came out. So my coworker had just watched it and immediately emailed the Florida Power and Light Legislative Affairs woman and said, we need a tour of our local nuclear power plant ASAP, because just outside our district, we had a nuclear power plant. I was bewildered by how safe the nuclear power plant was. I've never been to a safer place in my entire life. Right from the get-go, I actually didn't make it in. I was carrying a pocket knife, and it triggered their alarm, and I didn't realize I had the pocket knife on me. The alarm went off, and I was in a literally a cell for 15 minutes while they cleared the threat. And the entire time, a man with an AR-15 was standing there with it aimed, ready to take me down because I had a pocket knife on me. In my further discussion about their security that I had once they cleared me as not a threat, because obviously, I was asking them about their other security protocols. They have a team of retired Navy SEALs, unannounced, attack the nuclear plant at least once every 6 months, but not consistently on the time. Never once have the Navy SEALs successfully broken into the plant. They've never gotten through their security. And then the best of all in their safety protocols was that in 2001, following 9/11, they emptied out all the nuclear reaction, all the more dangerous, well, I'm not going to put quotes dangerous, it is dangerous, all the more dangerous parts of the nuclear reactor, and flew a plane into it to test what would happen if 9/11 had hit there instead of the two towers. And the only danger that resulted out of flying a plane into the plant, the concrete was so thick that it made no impact on the inside of anything on the inside of it. And the danger was falling plane debris. So I will say, when I went and really did an in-person tour of it, all of my fears of nuclear energy safety were very much resolved. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that's the same reason that most people don't get to have a tour of their nuclear power plant, is that they are so heavy security. Mm-hmm. That being said, the fossil fuel answer to why fossil fuels instead of nuclear energy is really, it's comparable to Cantillon effects. I don't know if you're familiar with those.
I'm not.
The idea that when you're printing money,
okay,
if the money gets to let's say my buddy Garrett commenting in the chat, if he gets the money first, inflation doesn't, well, the Misesian definition of inflation is as soon as the money supply grows, but the price inflation doesn't immediately hit. But when Garrett goes out and spends it on, I don't know, he donates to this podcast.
Which you should definitely do. We're on Patreon. Facebook Living Practice. Also, Thomas on Patreon. Garrett, you should definitely follow.
It's now put a little money into the market, and the price inflation has started to happen. And he had the new money before the new prices hit. You now get to use the money, and again, you'll use the money. The prices have changed a little bit, but not all the way. And the idea is that sooner recipients of money benefit from it.
Okay.
The same concept is kind of how I describe fossil fuels. Fossil fuels have been in the game longer than nuclear energy. And as such, they've benefited from certain technologies being catered to them for 200 years in ways that nuclear energy hasn't. Now, green energy people make the same claim that that's the reason green energy can catch up with fossil fuels. Their energy sources are not nearly as reliable, which is why I'm unimpressed by their claims. Even Alex Epstein himself says with time, nuclear energy will probably replace fossil fuels as it starts to break that technological barrier where fossil fuels have so much of the system in place for them already. Even the most pro-fossil fuel guys think that nuclear energy will eventually replace it. In the meantime, fossil fuels benefit from having been the biggest kid on the block for 200 years. And until nuclear energy catches up, fossil fuels have a distinct advantage. And even by the most pro-nuclear argument, we should be proliferating fossil fuels to pave the way for nuclear. To make these technologies that nuclear will rely on, we should have the most efficient technologies catered towards nuclear.
I think Garrett responded
with kind of a mixed bag. It's that it's good, but it's not good enough yet.
Yeah. That seems to be. I think the more I looked into it, the more it kind of seemed like the answer here. Where it's like, yeah, it seems like it would be like going forward. That's going to be like long term would be the main source of energy if we want to be productive, but it's not. We're not there yet. I think Garrett commented the rest of his questions, so I'm gonna click. I'm gonna read them all off, and then we'll go through it.
Well, shout out to Garrett for listening to it.
Yeah, shout out to Garrett. I don't know who he is, but shout out. Investment oil infrastructure stagnated the last 2 years. There are 1,900 active oil drilling permits issued in the U.S., but none are being acted on. I believe the companies no longer see investments in new drilling sites is worthwhile, especially considering how years ago oil prices hit. I don't know if that means negative 32 or just $32 a barrel. Yeah. So.
Like I said, Garrett's smarter than I am, so I was worried when he started asking questions. But yeah, I can comment on this. Well, I think a lot of the reason oil is stagnating is all the ESG stuff, or investment in oil is stagnating is all the ESG stuff we see going on. In fact, so today I presented my paper at the Mises Institute, and one of the suggestions that got offered to me was rather than looking at oil prices, looking at the market cap of oil companies compared to green energy companies and looking at the success that these companies are having. And my response at the time was, I think there'd be a phenomenal way to research this if such a thing existed. But at the end of the day, as much as I love big oil, like my t-shirt says, it really is no such this myth of the big oil company keeping down the green energy is the exact opposite of the truth. The reality is that the big oil company is relying on ESG investors and is actively pushing green energy. I'm not doing air quotes enough. They're actively pushing it, and they're suppressing what we would once have imagined as big oil. And as such, there are no companies that are big oil investments. So I would probably say that's part of the reason that the investments have stagnated the last 2 years. And we want more on that. Episode 2095 of the Tom Woods Show, where I discuss business tools pushing ESG. Anyway,
trying to bring up you on Tom Woods. I get it. Yeah, bring it up every time. It's fine.
Well, it's one of the few impressive things I've done. But anyway, you can tell I'm proud of it because I know which episode it was.
I was going to say, yeah, that's a precise reference right there.
But the other reality of that is that as much as we push in alternative energies, these alternative energies still rely on fossil fuels to keep them going. But as far as what Garrett said, that compared to peak oil and whatnot, truth of the matter is that if we keep pushing ways that will stagnate investing, if we keep pushing these things and we keep deterring oil, what we're basically doing is forcing the economy to become the static economy of these scientists' projections and begging for the civilization collapse that they're looking for. Like, if we keep pushing the stagnation of these investments, we won't get the dynamic economy that we need to maintain improvements in oil to fight off that problem.
It definitely
I hope that answered your question, Garrett. If it didn't, I'm kind of sorry.
No, I that's a comment. Like, I don't know Garrett, but I'm very hesitant. But anytime I hear about how about this, when someone reads the current market as a reference or source for something going on in today's society, I'm very hesitant how about this, believe the claim, because I think so much of the market has just been, like you said, it's ESG, BlackRock, all these things that just kind of skewed the market so much that using like investment numbers and that kind of stuff just kind of seems like if there was no influence, there was no ESG, I would get it. But because of ESG and how it has forced companies to curtail to the ESG control, where it kind of seems like it doesn't seem proper to use that as a reference,
Which I think I think that's what made Garrett's question so good. Of the peak oil claims are easy to shut down and just smack down. When you take the claims and compare them to the market today, whether it's artificial or not, the market today looks the way it does, and we're either going to keep trending in that direction or not. And when you recognize that ESG does exist, all these things do exist, and oil investment is stagnating, what does that say about these claims? And it really does change the question. Oil is going to run out if we have a static economy. Invest in and proliferate oil production.
Next question.
The only way to not run out of oil is to use more of it.
On the face of it, things that are powered by natural phenomena like wind and sunshine seem more reliable than an energy source we have to dig out of the ground. Is this not the case?
This is absolutely not the case. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier on your what are fossil fuels question. I was talking about their natural storage capacity and their amount of energy per unit of the source. It's true that I can go out and find sunshine faster than I can go find oil. And it's like for my research, I was doing a history of alternative energies to try and find their largest innovations that have occurred in the alternative energy markets. And whenever you look at the history of solar energy, the very first things you get are like Grug walked outside, Grug felt sunshine, heat, good. And like that is the first use of solar energy. And then after that, we get mirrors and magnifying glasses to make fire. So if your question is solar energy more accessible than fossil fuels, to the extent that I can walk outside right now and immediately undo the effects of my air conditioning. I can get heat. Well, not right now because it's nighttime, which is another issue. But but I could walk outside and immediately have access to that solar energy. Sure. The difference is that when you access that fossil fuel based energy, it is an enormously more amount of energy that is stored in that unit of fossil fuel. So even though it's harder to initially access, the amount of energy you get out of one rock of coal is much more than I get walking outside in the sun or from a solar panel or from so many solar panels. So at the end of the day, it is intuitively, it is easier to access solar or wind energy. It is easier to access the wind, but it is much harder to access the wind or the sun in a way that can provide even nearly as much energy as fossil fuels can. Although, as far as accessing wind energy goes, I don't know if you guys saw this going around on Twitter recently. Nina Turner, that god-awful Twitter account, retweeted it. That they recently have been looking into using kite surfing and wind harnessing technology to power boats which for those who haven't put one and one together is they've invented sailboats here in 2023.
Listen, man, as long as I get to be a pirate on a sailing ship, I'm fine with it.
I will say that's a pretty solid selling point.
Like, aesthetically speaking, I love it, but I know it doesn't. I thought I have to keep in mind myself. Aesthetics aren't all that matter.
Which is most of what matters.
Yeah, this is most of what matters. You know, I had for those listening, I had a tweet the other week where I was like, "Say what you want about World War II. We all know who had the best aesthetics."
I loved that. I saw that today. Was that the other day or was that today?
I think it was the other day I tweeted it out.
Okay, I saw that today. I was sitting in my office. I looked at my office and I said, "Dude, you gotta read this."
What was that?
You know, I was gonna say something about certain books in my office, but I'm not gonna incriminate myself or others.
Smart. That's why I have the lights on. You can't make it with books are back there. That's what the lights are for. You know. But okay, next question. How would the switch from fossil fuels to clean energy affect the production of things like cars, medicine, other commodities?
It would destroy the world. I mean, that's not understating it. It would. You think about it, go walk out and look at your car and tell me how many parts of it are plastic. Even without me having to even without you having to imagine the reality of how much we rely on fossil fuel labor to build the car, how much we rely on that labor to build the car, and how much that would go away. Even if we take out the fact that, even if we take out all the other facts of fossil fuels, everything else, go look at how many parts of your car are plastic. Plastic is a byproduct of fossil fuels. That's where we get it from. You switch to solar panels, plastic's gone. Now, of course, the anti-impact green energy people will tell me that that's a win-win. We get rid of plastic and we get rid of fossil fuels. But go look at your car. Tell me how much is plastic. Tell me how much of most things you see in the day are made of plastic. Now, there are realities of that where it's made parts of life more artificial. It's made parts of life worse in certain ways. And that's an ethical question to be handled. From a strict economics and production question, it would completely overhaul the entire production of everything just on the grounds that that's where our plastic comes from. The next point that you get into is what I started to kind of wave off there is the fossil fueled machine labor. Fossil fueled machine labor is what builds cars. It's what builds. You could not build the structures we have in the world without fossil fueled machine labor. And then the next element of that, taking it further, fossil fueled machine labor frees up human beings to specialize in other less laborious type jobs. And as such, the very engineers and physicists having the ideas for these buildings and these cars would be less likely to be engineers and physicists because we wouldn't be able to be wasting people on academic professions because we're relying on people for labor that fossil fuel had freed up. So layer after layer after layer, fossil fuel is building the entire process. I mean, if you look at the entire capital structure from the absolute highest order good to the consumer good itself, every step of it relies on fossil fuels, or is the fossil fuels themselves, and as such, the entire structure of production shuts down without fossil fuels.
I think that is a topic that, like, when I talk to my liberal friends about this, they always just talk about like energy for like house and their personal things. But they never seem to take into account like the production side of things.
Yeah, they don't take into the fact that, okay, it's great that you need energy for your house to have air conditioning, but also you needed energy to build your house. People ignore that completely.
Yeah. That definitely seems like an underappreciated argument that seems to be brought up more.
I might actually write on capital theory and fossil fuels as a Mises Wire article tomorrow at the office. That might be the first thing I do when I get into work tomorrow because
you have such a cool fucking job.
It's only for 2 months of the summer, but it's the coolest job.
You have like the coolest summer vacation.
I was talking to if any of your listeners are familiar with Dr. Jonathan Newman, he's one of the professors here with the fellowship. And I was talking to him the other day. We had lunch and we were on our way back. I said, man, I don't want to go back to work. And he goes, yeah, I don't want to go back to work where I read the books I would have been reading anyway and write the things I would have written on my couch.
Now, Jonathan Newman, he's someone that I'm supposed to have on the podcast if I can ever finish cronyism.
That's Patrick Newman.
Patrick Newman. Yes, I get him and Jonathan Newman confused sometimes. Jonathan Newman's the guy who wrote he's the one with the beard, right? In the kids' book.
Jonathan Newman has the beard. He's normally seen in Hawaiian shirts.
Yeah.
I think he's one of the most underrated Twitter follows there is.
He is definitely.
He's so funny.
He is.
And it's in such obscure. My favorite tweet ever, and I might be the only one who laughed at it, but I thought it was so funny. It was that speed dating app, or not speed dating app, it's speed dating meme where it says the guy asks a question and her answer is something. He says, "Oh, next, I don't want her anymore."
Mhm.
The question was, "Where do you fall in the methodenstrate?" And she said, "What's the methodenstrate?" And I lost it. He has the most obscure jokes on his Twitter, and I think they're so funny.
He once screenshotted. I made some poster like maybe a year back about. I think it was transubstantiation, and about the Protestant, like it was like neocon removal and about like Steppy and other popular Protestant accounts were commenting. The Catholic guys were commenting, and it was just like L plus ratio responses. And he screenshot it and said, "Early ecumenical councils."
That's what. So Dr. Newman and I on Fridays we skip lunch and have a cigar together instead of lunch. Best part of my week, for one.
Beautiful.
And I love that time because Dr. Newman is Protestant, but there is a lot that we as Catholics can learn from Protestants. And Dr. Newman is a very smart guy, and I've learned so much from listening to his Protestant views.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so great because it's such a rare combination of the kind of guy who is smart enough to really teach you something, but also willing to just post that on Twitter. Like it's so rare when you get both of those things.
Yeah. He's definitely a fun one. I enjoy his lectures on Mises Heal. When Mises Heal happens,
I never to watch this because I can't be complimenting him this much with him watching.
Yeah, never. He should never watch this. No, and honestly, you are the only person at Mises Institute who should watch this. No one else should watch. Marcel, no. Jeff Dice, no, none of them. Maybe So Bishop. Okay, what's the next one? Here we go. The last one. Oh, that was actually my last objection. Wow. I thought I had more.
There are just so few objections to be had to fossil fuels. It's a beautiful civilization building energy sources.
Really, they're all there's only like 5 major objections that are actually brought up ever, and none of them, as you've seen, actually account for anything. They're very short-sighted.
Well, that's the other thing with luxury beliefs is you find
great term.
Oh, it's a great term. It's fantastic. But you find that because most of these people holding these beliefs are living in a place of luxury and really haven't had their beliefs challenged, most luxury beliefs really only have like 5 major points, and they fall apart very quickly upon being challenged.
Okay, last question. What books or podcasts can you recommend to the average listener who just wants to know enough about the topic to defend this position among their liberal friends?
Absolutely. So there are a couple. First one is the Mises Institute plug. So I actually I worked with Tho Bishop on this project. I didn't end up finishing through on the project. Most of it is Tho's work. I say that I don't want to take any credit for it because most of it is not my work. But it's a really cool project. They called it's Fueling a Freer Future. And if you go to Mises.org/fueling-freer-future, it'll come right up. Or if you just go to Mises.org and click beginners, it'll also come right up. I think it's going to be 9 episodes. Garrett makes a good point that I'm going to get to in a minute. I think it's going to be 9 episodes all said and done. They are 3-minute videos, just animated, going through why we need fossil fuels. Right now, there are 3 episodes already out. I believe there are 6 more to come. But even the 3 episodes already out are great. So that's a quick, if you're looking for a podcast, it's not technically a podcast, but they're 3-minute episodes. When it's over, it'll be 9 episodes. Throw one on your drive to work each day, and by the end of a week and a half, you'll have a solid foundation. The other thing I'd recommend is Alex Epstein's. I'm sorry, he might differentiate that. He doesn't want to be related to his better-known cousin Jeffrey. But Alex Epstein's Substack, I think it's called The Coal Truth or Energy Talking Points. If you type in Alex Epstein into Substack, it'll come up. He has about once a week, he'll post something, and usually it's a audio or video component where it's an interview or a debate he did. and then he'll also have written the transcript of it. And then the other thing he'll do is just common myths refuted. So that's like, he comes out with one typically once a week. That's a great place to go to learn about this. If you're willing to go a little more than just a Substack or a video series, Alex Epstein's book, Fossil Future, is the best thing that's ever been written on this topic. It is phenomenal. He has a shorter book called The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. It's about half the length of the book. So if you want to start smaller, that's an easier read first. But Fossil Future is the be-all, end-all of the argument. And last but not least is Garrett's comment we just had up there. I personally really recommend Connor Mortell's articles on Mises.org. I have a few up already on Mises.org. One came out a couple weeks ago that I mentioned during this live stream of fossil fuels enabling us to fight wildfires and other climate disasters. I have one. So my next piece of art coming out on Monday is called Smoking, a Public Good. I don't care if anyone reads it. That's my magnum opus. But then my next one after that is going to be on fossil fuels again. It's coming not this coming week, but the following week's Tuesday. It's going to be on solar and wind not actually being cheaper than fossil fuels. And then, like I said on the stream, I'm going to try and write something on capital theory and fossil fuels that I can hopefully get out in the next few weeks or so.
I look forward to that one on the green energy one, on the wind power and solar power. If I once I read it, I see if it's, it's like not too heady, not too brainy, I would love to have you back on for a live reading of it, because I think this is an interesting topic.
I'd absolutely be willing to do it. I got into a lot of the points I make it in this, so you may want to read it first before you have me back on in case it's too redundant. But I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw Zero Hedge quote Joe Biden, just a blank quote, or just a plain quote that said, coal and solar are now cheaper than fossil fuels. That's Joe Biden. I was like, there's no way he said, and I pulled it up. I was like, oh my gosh, Joe Biden just said, I was like, that's a bold-faced lie. And even if it weren't a lie, it'd be missing so many other details.
Fantastic. Well, I want to end it with a final quote, but before we go into the final quote, anything you want to add on the topic, and then plugs, like where can people find you, what are you working on next, that kind of stuff.
All right, so my best place to find me is my Twitter. It's at Natural Authority. There is no Y in authority because I didn't have enough spaces in the username. So that's the best place to find me. I post everything I do there. I post a lot there though. So if you just don't want me to not ever shut up like I do there, Mises.org, search my name. Most of my stuff's there. I use the Oscar-tomism Substack as my own personal Substack, so you can check me out there as well. And then the last thing I want to add, just thank you so much for having me on. I feel like this was a really good discussion between retarded St. Thomas Aquinas and retarded Alex Epstein, where you steelmanned the arguments against it and I took them down, but neither the steelmans nor my addresses were as good as the experts really would have been.
Yes.
I loved doing this. I really think we did get into the crux of it though, and the important matters. This was a blast. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on. Now I'll end it with this quote. Let me get it up here. I'll give you $5 if you can guess the quote. I am a sinner but unrepentant. You see, I don't practice environmentalism. I don't believe in it. I don't recycle and I don't conserve, except when it pays to do so. I like clean air, really clean air, like the kind that comes from air conditioners. I like the bug-free indoors. I like development as in buildings, concrete, capitalism, prosperity. I don't like swamps, and that goes for wetlands, even Bollywood, Everglades, or jungles, rainforests. I see all animals except dogs and cats as likely disease carriers unless they're in a zoo.
All right. I don't know who got it, so I've got to go with the repository of all unclaimed quotes. Was it G.K. Chesterton?
Lew Rockwell.
Oh, yes, that's great. God bless Lew Rockwell. Let me just throw this out here. Lew Rockwell, I'm going to pull this up. I have to check. How old is Lew Rockwell right now? Because it's going to matter to this story. Lew Rockwell is 79 years old. He's the current acting president of the Mises Institute. He's 79, and he said, F it, I'll do it myself. Now,
hell yeah.
He's running, and then on top of it, he last year when I was the intern for Jeff Dice, who's the president at the time, and I don't make it clear, I love Jeff Dice more than life itself, and I miss him dearly at the Institute. He was a a good friend and an incredible mentor. So I want to give him huge props before I cheer the acting president and act like it's a celebration that he's an incredible man. But anyway, when I was Jeff's intern, part one of my jobs was just to be the summer fellow guy with a key so I could let the other fellows into the institute on Saturday. Every single Saturday, Lou Rockwell set off the alarm because he was in there working well after we locked him. That man is an animal.
I love Lou. And everyone wants to hear more about how great Lou Rockwell is. There was a Lou Rockwell respect stream I had with Buck Johnson, Mac, In Democracy, Jared, and I think there was one more person. I can't remember who it was. It was I want to say it was Hagfist or David Gordon's biggest respecter, but I could be wrong about that. Also, if anyone's listening, go follow David Gordon's biggest respecter on Twitter. Used to be Hagfist. Guy's great. He'd been a podcast a few times. Love that guy.
He won the Mises Institute oral exam the year that
he's such a nerd.
So he's at least smarter than I am.
He is such a nerd, but in a fun way. Great guy. Everyone go give him a follow. But yeah, that was from Lou Rockwell's Against the Left on his chapter on environmentalism, which is good. The entire chapter is super boomer. He even writes about how he complains to the Starbucks employees about giving them the styrofoam cups.
That man has earned the right to be super boomer. Yeah, I couldn't care.
Be boomer and it's fine.
Oh my gosh, Lou Rockwell. Last year, Jensen was trying to set it up. It never came to fruition because Lou's older and it's hard to logistically work things out. But he was trying to set it up for me and Lou to go to Latin mass together. Like, God bless Lou Rockwell.
I love Lou. He is everything I'm from him. I'm just like, yep, this is great. I love it. He's a great guy to read. But yeah, that's the episode. Everyone, thanks for listening. Going forward, tentatively next Thursday, this might fall true. We don't know yet. But Ad Hazlitt from Twitter will come on to Explain to Me Like I'm Five and Integralism. So it's going to be a very exciting episode because he really knows his stuff. And after that, I think it's still on the books. Jeremy from Contradentilas is coming on for Explain to Me Proofs for the Existence of God. And I have formulated objections from Quint's ACS to Scholarly ACS to Eastern Orthodox objections in natural theology. So that's going to be a very exciting episode. You don't want to miss it. I don't think I have anything else planned on the books. I know the guys at Austria Thomas are all working on things. Bokakov has been very busy with school, but he has several articles he's working on. Eincast or Dr. Timbit is very busy as well, but he's also working on stuff. And hopefully, God willing, this weekend I can pump out my next dialogue I'm working on. It's going to be a apologetics dialogue on the Old Testament canon. So hopefully that can be out by Monday, hopefully. But besides that, I think that's everything we have going on here at Osteotomism. Colin, again, if you ever want to do a podcast of your own or you ever want to do anything, this website is yours to use as well. But
that's
yeah,
good to know because I don't yet, but it's always in the back of my head. I'm a 26-year-old white man. I yearn for the podcast.
I'm telling you, dude, if you and So Bishop just got on and started chatting for an hour, that'd be incredible.
So he's way too important to waste his time on podcasts with me.
That's right. I had him on.
So is one of the smartest people you'll ever meet, and he's so behind the scenes that you don't always notice it. And he's also just an Etsy meme lord, so you don't always notice it. Those one of the smartest guys you'll ever meet in your life.
I had him on one time, and I had massive COVID brain fog, and it's like it is the second worst episode I've ever done. What sucks just so is he carried the entire episode. He carried it. That's how great he is. He carried the entire episode. So
he was carrying that episode anyway, just so we're clear.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I can't compare. No, not at all. He's just I honestly, if I ever finish that Napoleon book, I want to get you and him on for a Napoleon episode. Yeah. But I'm a very slow reader, and so it's gonna take me a while. But if I ever get it finished.
So is the one who sold me on Napoleon. It was him, me, and another fellow sat around for maybe 2 hours in the Rothbard Village parking lot. And Tho just went off on the entire history of Napoleon, basically explaining because Tho has the most strategic mind of anyone you'll ever know. he's very intelligent across the board, but his specialty is in strategy and in pursuing power, and he sees that in ways the average person just can't see it. And it all came up because I was applying for my PhD, and I mentioned that I might be applying for my PhD at Florida State. He said, Connor, God knows why, Florida State has one of the best funded Napoleonic research centers in America. Here is the dissertation you're going to write. It's going to get you all the funding you need, and it's going to get you published in things other than the Austrian economics journals. Literally, I casually mentioned Florida State, and he went off on 2 hours and gave me a whole career path that was defined. And if you pick another, it wasn't like he knew Florida State really well. You pick another school, here's the plan. The man is a genius and is a strategy for everything.
He is fantastic. Anyone listening, definitely go follow him on Twitter. Check him out. He's an incredible guy. But I think that's everything for this episode. Connor, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a lot of fun. Definitely, I know more about the topic than ever before. Anyone listening, be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and have a good night.